Happy Easter and welcome to another episode of Casual Learning. I'm your host, John Bannan. So, what's the deal with the dichotomy of existence? Dichotomy of existence. Well, one of the most important questions that there is why is there anything at all? Very basic and profound question, and one that is seemingly impossible to answer, but it's not, and I'm going to give you the answer. So, when you think about the question, why is there anything at all, in a material sense? The answer to that question has got to be an answer that doesn't raise any further questions. Because if there's further questions to ask, then you really haven't gotten to the bottom of it all, have you? So we know that the answer to that question, why is there anything at all, in order to be a satisfactory answer, has to be a final answer. It can't raise further questions. And what could do that? What possible answer could you give that doesn't itself raise another question? Well, there is an answer that actually can do that, and it's this. Uncaused. That which is uncaused has no further need of explanation. There isn't another question you can ask about it. You can't ask the question, well, why is it uncaused? The fact that it's uncaused means there is no cause to its existence. So you can't ask the question, why is it uncaused? It simply is. It simply is uncaused. So, the answer to the question, why is there anything at all, has to be answered by something that is uncaused. Because there's no further need to question the existence of that which is uncaused. So the answer to the big question has got to be an uncaused state. It has to be something that is uncaused. Now, the idea of something being uncaused is metaphysical. Everything in material reality is caused. Cause and effect is an inescapable law of physics. So you can't just point to something and say, oh, well, that's uncaused. Because everything around you in the material world is caused. So anything that you point to that you could say this is uncaused can't be a part of material reality. It has to be part of metaphysics. Meta meaning beyond physics, beyond the physical. So anything that's uncaused is going to be beyond material reality, and it's not going to be subject to scientific experimentation, because science can only study what's here and now in the material world. It can't study non-material things, like something that's uncaused. This is totally in the realm of metaphysics. Science will never be able to study that which is not material. Consequently, science can never answer this question. Why is there anything at all? It's a metaphysical, philosophical question. It's the only way to answer it. It's outside the realm of science. Science will never be able to answer this question because you're dealing with uncaused reality, which is beyond the realm of scientific study. The dichotomy of existence is a way to answer the question, why is there anything at all? And a dichotomy is two things that are mutually exclusive, meaning it's either one or the other, it can't be both. And those two things are jointly exhaustive of all possibilities. So it includes everything the answer could possibly be. It would have to be in one of these two categories. Jointly exhaustive, mutually exclusive categories. And the dichotomy of existence is this. There's these two categories. That cover all possibilities for reality. One category is absolute nothingness. The other is everythingness. Now, it's important to understand that both of these categories are uncaused. So you're talking about a dichotomy between uncaused states. And these are the options in terms of answering the question, why is there anything at all? Because these are uncaused. And there aren't any other uncaused states besides these two. This is it. This is your choice. Now, absolute nothingness means there is nothing, there never was anything, there never will be anything. There's no God, there's no material reality, there's no Big Bang, there's no outer space, there isn't even some place that you could put something. It's not like this is a void of some sort. It's not. It's simply the lack of existence of reality, any sort of reality. There's no time. I mean, if you can name it, it's not in this. And you can see how this would be an uncaused state, because what could cause something like this? There's nothing. There's nothing there. It has no cause. It would simply be the case. You can't get something from nothing. So this can't cause anything to exist. Likewise, nothing could cause this to exist either. So this is a very simple state. But it's also one of the hypothetical possible uncaused states that one can think of. Absolute nothingness is clearly not the case because we're here. Physically, we couldn't be here if this was the case. So we know this is one side of the dichotomy, but we know that this is not the actual case because we're here. The other side is everythingness. So what this is everything that is logically possible is included on this side. Everything. Remember, the dichotomy has to be jointly exhaustive of all possibilities. So the two possibilities are nothing or everything. Now, everythingness includes as a possibility, it's a logical possibility, that there be less than everything, or somethingness. So everythingness includes the possibility of somethingness. Yeah, and somethingness means, well, reality is something, but it's not everything that's logically possible. And, that's what the universe surely seems to be. But it's important to understand that the universe, the somethingness that we have, is included in everything that is logically possible. It's not separate. It's part of this side of the dichotomy because it's logically possible that less than everything that is logically possible to exist, which is an infinite number, actually exists or is actually real. Somethingness. So that's also a possibility. So it's got to be on this side of the dichotomy. It's got to be part of everythingness. And it's not its own option because it's included in everythingness. Now, everythingness has a big problem. And that problem is everythingness could be, in a material sense, anything logically possible that you want it to be out of an infinite number of possibilities, including an infinite number of realities. Could be that as well. But something has to tell it what to be. So there has to be a gatekeeper. There's got to be something that tells it what to be, what is real and what is not real out of the infinite number of possibilities for material reality. So this side of everythingness only works if there is an uncaused gatekeeper that tells everythingness what to be. And that gatekeeper is God. So everythingness only works if there is a God that tells everythingness what to be. You have to have a decision maker. So the reality is that everythingness isn't a thing in itself. What it boils down to is an uncaused God with the power to create material reality out of the infinite number of logical possibilities for material reality. So it has to be an uncaused God. That's the only way everythingness works. Has to have an uncaused decision maker deciding what to make real and what not to make real. Out of the infinite number of logical possibilities for material reality. Uncaused God. Obviously, God has to be uncaused because if something caused God, then that caused God would be part of the one of the possibilities for material creation, and therefore not the one in charge of deciding what gets made and what does not get made. But everything needs that decision maker, that gatekeeper, to decide what gets made and what does not get made out of the infinite number of material possibilities for reality. And that decision maker, that gatekeeper, can't be a creation, can't be made of material reality, which means, God, that decision maker has to be uncaused, has to be. So what you end up with is a dichotomy of existence between God and absolute nothingness. That's it. Those are the only two uncaused states. It's got to be one or the other. That's what the dichotomy means between two uncaused states. Is you ask the question, well, why is there anything at all? Well, it has to be an uncaused state that answers that question. There's only two uncaused states. There's absolute nothingness, and then there's God. It's got to be one of those two. Okay, so why is it one and not the other? Well, when you're dealing with a dichotomy that is includes mutually exclusive options, can't be both, it's got to be one or the other, which are jointly exhaustive of all possible states, which these two are. Here you got absolute nothingness, there you got everything that is materially, logically possible, including God, including less than what is logically infinitely possible. Something. So when you got that sort of dichotomy between two uncaused states, the answer to, well, why one and not the other is because it's simply the case. It has to be one or the other. It can't be both. There's no way to decide one or the other. There's no cause for either one of these states. So there's no answer to that question, why one or the other, because there's nothing that's controlling why it's one or the other. It simply is the case that it has to be one or the other. And so why is it an uncaused God? Because that's simply the case. It simply happens to be the case that that's what it is. And that's the answer. So why is there anything at all? Because it's simply the case that we're on this side of the dichotomy of everythingness. And on that side, it's an uncaused God that has to be the case. And that's it. That's the answer. Why is there anything at all? Because we're on this side of the dichotomy, and that requires an uncaused God. There's no more questions to ask. That's the end of the line. questions answered. Um, you can talk about what God is like, and what God's attributes are, and it gives you some insight to see what the other side of the dichotomy is. Absolute nothingness is simple. There's nothing complex about this. It's simple. Um, thank God it's not the case, but looking at its characteristic, it's simple. And the same thing with an uncaused God. An uncaused God is simple. It's a simple, uncaused state of being. Um, because God is not made of material parts. It's not a material creation. You can't, take God apart and figure out how he works. Because he's not material, you can't do that. So, because you can't do that, there's no complexity to examine, which means you can describe God as simple, just like absolute nothingness. Now, there's nothing simple about what God can create. God can create an infinite number of logical possibilities for material creation. That's not simple. But God himself can be described as simple, just as you can describe absolute nothingness as simple. And that only means that God's not made of material parts, so there's no way to figure out what he's doing. It's not possible. There's nothing to examine. He's simply uncaused. It makes God mysterious. True. Absolutely. God is mysterious. But God is actually the answer to why is there anything at all. Physicists explain how the material world works in accordance with the laws of physics and matter, mass, energy, space-time, gravity, different particles of physics. But physics can't answer the question, why is there anything at all? Because that requires an uncaused metaphysical answer, and physics is only involved in the caused, and it can only study the caused. So science and physics can't answer that question, why is there anything at all? Only this can answer that question. And in addition, science can only study the here and now, what's in the material world. Science can't study what's beyond the universe. Because scientists, scientific instruments, you can't leave the universe in order to study those things and bring back the information that you've learned and tell the world what you found. You can't leave the universe. Because of the principle of conservation of energy, you can't leave the universe because all matter is a form of energy, and energy has to be preserved in the universe from the conservation of energy. You can't leave the universe. You can't pop out of existence. You can't send a scientific instrument to another universe, let's say, because it would pop out of existence, and that would mean there would be a loss of energy to the universe. And that can't happen. That's against a major law of physics, and it's physically impossible. That would violate the principle of conservation of energy. So there's no way science could leave the universe. Scientists, scientific instruments, they can't leave the universe. It's impossible. Science can't leave the universe to answer any questions beyond the universe. Can't be done. It's impossible. It'll never be able to be done. Never. So when you're asking the question, why is there anything at all? Science is never going to give you the answer. It's impossible. The answer can only come from metaphysics. And this is the answer. An uncaused God. So, what are the attributes of God? Because God is the answer as to why there is anything at all. God is uncaused. God is immaterial. Not meaning that God isn't there. Immaterial meaning that God is not made of matter. God is not made of anything. He's not made of material parts. He's uncaused. He's an uncaused state of being. God is there, but he's not made of matter or energy. He's immaterial in that sense. God is not made of material parts. Actus purus. God is pure act. God is that which acts on everything else and causes those things to exist. But nothing acts on God. So God is pure act, actus purus. God is the first cause, the prime mover. God is a mystery. However, God is not nothingness. God is real. God is a real uncaused state of being. God is not like empty space or a void or nothingness or some sort of black box from which things come to be. No, God isn't any of those things. But God is not nothingness. Clearly not nothingness. God is reality. He's a reality. If it's not a reality you can see, it's immaterial. He's invisible. Because he has to be, because he's uncaused. You can't see that which is uncaused. You only see those things which are material. So God's invisible. And God has to be invisible. Because he's uncaused and immaterial. That's why you can't see God. At least God the Father. That is God the creator of material reality. As opposed to God the Son, Jesus. God is singular. There's only one God. There can't be two gods. First off, because God is uncaused, God doesn't have the power to create another God. Because you can't create that which is uncaused. It's impossible. So God can't create a second God. Even if God wanted to, he can't. Second thing is, there were two gods or more. They could both undo each other's creation. And you can't have a competitor God. And claim to be supremely in charge of what gets created and what does not get created in material reality out of the infinite number of possible logical possibilities for material reality. So you can't have a system with two or more gods. It can only be one. So God is singular. God has powers. God is omniscient. God knows everything. God is omnipotent. God has all powers. If there is a power that exists, or that is real, God has it. And God is omnipresent. God is everywhere. God would have to know everything and be everywhere in order to exert his power of omnipotence over everything. God creates material reality, destroys material reality, sustains material reality, changes material reality. And you have to have these powers in order to do that. Um, God's powers are, God can only have power over that which um, is logically possible. If it's a logically impossible thing you're talking about, then there is no power over such a thing. And it's not, God can't have a power which doesn't exist. So just because God can't do the illogical or the logically impossible doesn't mean he doesn't have the power to do that. Because there is no power that can do that. This is like the square circle. No, does God have the power to create a square circle? The answer is no, because there is no power that could create a square circle. They're illogical and contradictory states, and it simply can't. There's no way to do it. So there is no power that can do that sort of thing. And that doesn't mean God doesn't have that power. It's that the power doesn't exist. There's no reality that allows that sort of power. So God doesn't have it. The power doesn't exist, so you can't say God, oh, he doesn't have this power. Wait, the power doesn't exist. It's not real. It's not a power. So it's not a knock on God's omnipotence. So these are characteristics of God. And a very important thing to remember about God is the decision maker on what becomes real and what does not become real. Out of the infinite possible logical possibilities for material reality. So God is the creator. Creator of material reality. And this means God has to have a mind, because God has to decide what gets made and what does not get made. He's a decision maker. That means he has a mind. It's not a mind like a human mind. Human mind is made of matter, brain matter. God doesn't have a brain like we do, made of matter. God is not made of material parts. But God does decide in a guided fashion based on his nature what to make real and what not to make real. And his nature, we know from Jesus Christ, is good and perfect. So he's also perfectly good. So, there you have it. The answer. Why is there anything at all? Because an uncaused God is real and simply is the case. That's your answer. That's good news. On on a day like today, Easter, where the resurrection of Jesus is celebrated and the gospel really begins, the good news of his resurrection. This is good news. God must exist, and God is the answer to why there is anything at all. And Jesus tells us God is perfectly good. So, that's good news. Now, some people don't like that answer, but it's the inescapable logical deduction from metaphysics that is in fact the case. that an uncaused, perfectly good God is real. Now, some people like, well, some people don't like that answer for whatever reason. Even though it's good news for them, they don't like that answer. And so you'll get people who will say that reality is really something. Okay. But there's problems with this answer. The biggest problem with it is, well, it doesn't answer all the questions. You know, the answer to why is there anything at all shouldn't leave any other questions to be answered. But this leaves a big question. Somethingness? You know, reality is something and not something else? Okay. Why is that? Why this something and not some other something? Right? Doesn't answer that question. So it can't possibly be the correct answer because it leaves a question. Well, I know we have our universe and it's a certain way, that's true, but why isn't it just slightly different from that? Why this way and not another possible way? How do you explain that? There's no explanation for that. Because this isn't the answer. That's why. This is wrong. So people who tell you, oh, it's really just something, you know, there's no God, it just happens to be this way. That's not a good answer. It leaves this question. And the right answer would not leave a question still to be answered. Somethingness, this idea of somethingness, also suffers from a big problem, which is you know, how is something made real and not some other logical possibility? How does that happen? What decides that question? If not, you know, if it isn't an uncaused God, then what could possibly answer that question? What? So if you're saying there's no God, but something still has to decide what becomes real and what does not. So then you're talking about some sort of material mechanism for doing that. Something like, you know, chaos or randomness. But those sort of ideas, chaos and randomness, those sorts of ideas, they rely on a material mechanism for deciding the question of what becomes real and what does not. So this requires on a material mechanism. It is a material mechanism. Okay? So, but the problem with that is time begins. There's a beginning of time. The Big Bang proves it. The beginningless time paradox proves it. So if there's a beginning to time, that means there's a beginning to material reality, because time is intimately connected to mass and energy and material reality. You can't have one without the other. So they're not independent of one another. So if there's a beginning of time, there's a beginning of material reality. But material mechanisms are all subject to time because they're material. Everything material is subject to time. So how could something that is material, subject to time, cause time to begin? It can't. It can't do that because time, the thing that would cause time to begin can't be time, because, the thing that causes time to begin can't be the thing it's creating. Time can't be subject to the thing it's creating. Can't create itself. That's logically impossible. So, since there's a beginning to time, these material mechanisms or supposed explanations for why one thing is created and not another, it can't be correct. That can't possibly be the answer, because time begins and material reality begins. Consequently, material things can't explain the creation of material reality in time. That would be a form of self-creation. That's impossible. Logically impossible. Something can't create itself. So these explanations don't work if there's a beginning to time. And there is. The Big Bang, the beginningless time paradox, proves it. So because there has to be a beginning to time and material reality, no material mechanism can explain the existence of reality. So they can't possibly be the answer to why there is anything at all. I'm sorry to all you materialists out there, but you're wrong. You're just wrong. Logically, and even the scientific evidence of the Big Bang, which shows that there was a beginning to time and material reality, proves you're wrong. You're just wrong. So, besides the Big Bang proving material reality had a beginning and time had a beginning, there's also the beginningless time paradox, which proves it. It's a logical, metaphysical proof that time had to begin. If you hear a barking dog, don't worry about it. That's my poodle, Rumple. he's excited and making noise upstairs. He's probably going to go out for a walk. All right, so the beginningless time paradox. If time had no beginning, then time could never reach the present moment, because an unlimited amount of time would have to pass to reach the present moment, which is impossible. So, let's say this was the present time, the present moment right here. If you go backward in time, let's say to an infinite extent, right? This sort of situation is impossible because, for each moment in time, if there was an unlimited amount of prior time, you can't get through an unlimited amount of time. Therefore, the present moment could never arrive because you'd always be stuck in some unlimited amount of prior moments, prior time. But we know the present moment arrives because we're here, which means that this is an impossibility. There can't be an unlimited amount of prior time, which means that time had to begin. So this situation here, that's impossible. Prior time cannot be infinite, which means time has to begin. And if time begins, material reality has to begin too, because they're connected to one another. You can't have one without the other. So time and material reality have to have a beginning. And we call that beginning the Big Bang. But logically speaking, it has to have a beginning. However far back you want to go in time, there still has to be a beginning point. Has to be. And if time has to begin, the material reality has to begin. And it does. That means it can't be a material mechanism like chaos or randomness that causes it to begin. It's impossible. So you're talking about some sort of uncaused state creating material reality. And chaos and randomness are not uncaused states, so can't be the answer there. So, the idea that we just exist in a state of somethingness caused by some material mechanism like chaos or randomness is false. It's impossible. Time has to begin, material reality has to begin. Chaos and randomness are material mechanisms. Those things cannot exist if time does not exist. Therefore, they cannot be the cause of material reality. They cannot be the cause of somethingness. So materialists, atheists, atheists, anyone who doesn't believe in the uncaused, singular, immaterial, omnipotent God that I'm referring to, you're wrong. You're just wrong. So, one clever argument some of these materialists like to make is the idea that, well, true, there had to be a beginning of time, let's say, but nothing caused it. So some people like to claim that somethingness has no cause. Essentially, they're claiming that somethingness itself is an uncaused state. Doesn't answer the question of why this something and not some other something. So if you want to answer why is there something at all, you better be able to answer that question. And they can't. But they could say, well, there's no cause. And they'll say, well, there can't be a cause because there was, at the beginning of time, there was no time for anything to cause it. Therefore, it had no cause, right? You like that clever argument? It's a clever argument. It makes some logical sense. But if you think about it, it's totally false. That essentially amounts to the idea that something came from nothing. So if you have somethingness that has no cause, then what you're talking about is magic. You're talking about somethingness, poof, coming from nothingness. That's magic. That's pure magic. Pure magic. So this idea violates a basic rule of philosophy, which is you can't get something from nothing. So you can't get something from nothing. So nothing has nothing to give. So it can't possibly give you something. So you can't. This is an impossibility. It's an impossibility. So what this essentially is, this explanation, it's magic. It's an appeal to pure magic. And pure magic isn't real. It has no cause in a material sense. So you can't get a material thing created from nothing. That's illogical. You can't get something from nothing. So that means it's an appeal to pure magic. This explanation is an appeal to pure magic. Plus, the idea of something that isn't material causing something else. You got to understand that in a situation where you're talking about an uncaused state causing material reality, that idea of cause is not taken in a material sense of cause and effect, because that sort of cause requires material things. We're talking about a different sort of cause. This is a cause from an uncaused state to a caused state. So the uncaused state is causing the caused thing. All right? So you're going from uncaused, causing a caused state. Now this is a very special and unique circumstance. And our general definition of cause is only involving material things. So this is a special definition of cause. You can call it a cause because if it wasn't for the reality of this thing wouldn't exist. So this thing has to be real in order for this to be real. And you can call it a cause in that sense. But it's a special definition of cause. It's not the ordinary definition of cause involving only material things. So this argument that there was no time for it to be cause, that's only logically true if you use cause in the sense of material causes purely. But in a special case where you're going from an uncaused state to a caused state, that isn't true. An uncaused state can cause a caused state, but it's a special definition of cause. It's a special sort of cause. Essentially, you could say, well, this has to be real in order for this to be real. And there's a causal connection in this sense, logically speaking, just not the ordinary definition of cause. So this is really a semantical or semantics argument. Really, it has to do with your understanding of what cause means. So this argument that there was no time for there to be a cause is a semantics argument. So don't get fooled. It's a semantics argument. And not only that, it violates the rule of something. You can't get something from nothing. So it should be obvious that this explanation is flawed, badly flawed. Okay. Yeah, so when you want to answer the question, why is there anything at all? The answer's got to be some sort of uncaused state. It has to be, because that's the only thing that leaves no further questions. So, I've examined the various possible uncaused states, or the ones that people might try to convince you are uncaused, and those are these. So, you just go through the list. The first explanation is an uncaused God. First reason for why there's anything at all is because there's an uncaused God. And this is, in fact, the correct answer. And that's the good news on this Easter morning. That is, in fact, the correct answer. Another possible uncaused state is absolute nothingness. But because we're here, we know that this is not the case. Can't be. We wouldn't be here if it was. So we know this is wrong. Another possibility is time didn't begin. So if time didn't begin, material reality never began. It was extended infinitely into the past. You wouldn't have to ask the question about what caused the beginning of everything, because there was never a beginning. Essentially, you're denying there ever was a beginning. You're just saying there's this endless past regression of cause and effect. Well, we know that's not true because there was a Big Bang, which began time and material reality. Plus, the beginningless time paradox proves that time and material reality had to begin. So this is wrong. Because time did have a beginning. It did have a beginning. And it had to have a beginning. So it couldn't be the case that time didn't begin. It had to begin at some point. It had to. And then last you're left with, well, it's somethingness. It's just something. Yeah, but this leaves the question, well, why this particular something and not another particular something? So it doesn't answer the final question. It leaves a question. That can't possibly be the answer. Plus, as I explained to you, this is an appeal to magic, or the idea you get something from nothing. And that's impossible. That's pure magic. This is impossible. Totally impossible. Plus, somethingness is included in everythingness, that side of the dichotomy. And the gatekeeper for that is an uncaused God. So God can do this. Why something and not something else? Because that's what God decided. That's the answer to this. So this is wrong too. So that's it. That's the only answer remaining on the board. That is the answer. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Maybe I'll do a future video addressing them or answer your comments below. Please press the subscribe button. I appreciate it. And, on this Easter morning, realize that the only answer is an uncaused God. For solid metaphysical logical reasoning, and because the Big Bang also shows it and proves it. So there is an uncaused God, and the reason why there's anything at all is because of God. Because God is real and has to be real. It's the only explanation left on the board. It's got to be the correct answer. That's it. I'm sorry, if you don't like that answer, or you're an atheist, or you just don't like that answer for some reason, I'm sorry, but that's it. That is the only answer, and it will always be the only answer. For the reasons I gave. Science is limited. Science cannot tell you about experimental and the metaphysical. The metaphysical is beyond physical reality. It's not within the realm of science. But metaphysical reality does prove the existence of an uncaused being, God, and God has to be there. And sorry, there's a limit to science. Science can't study something that's immaterial and uncaused like God. But God's got to be real regardless. So science has limits, and that's a truth. And you can't leave the universe. It's a violation of the principle of conservation of energy. Can't leave the universe to study something beyond the universe. Sorry, can't be done. It's impossible. And that's the truth. So, you know, this is the answer. That's all there is. That's it. All right. Happy Easter, everybody. Take care.